Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
We're back. Kevin's Corner, Kevin Bowen, Chris Presley coming at you on a Tuesday morning, June 22nd. Shout out to Jonathan Rahm. Don't know if he goes by Jonathan, if that's on the Spanish birth certificate or not, but that was pretty fun. I know, Chris Presley, you are not a diehard golf fan, but you get into the majors, and I think any sports fan can appreciate that emotion coming out of Mr. Rahm on Sunday afternoon.
And boy, is he playing well. I mean, that should be two in a row, right?
You're right. I know. I feel like we forgot at the Memorial he was up 6 shots on a great field, on a great golf course. And maybe I'm saying that because I didn't pick John Rahm. Although someone messaged me and said that I picked him on the podcast. Maybe I did. I didn't pick him in my brother and I are in a league. So, granted, I don't think we could pick him. I think we already picked him earlier in the year. But that's neither here nor there. Shout out to him. Awesome finish. Feel bad for Louis Oosthuizen. But, yeah, that was a fun way to kind of cap the weekend there. So now we get into NBA Finals.
Yep.
4 teams left there and a little bit of NHL, and then it gets quiet, and we'll keep coming at it. What do we got? About 4 weeks? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4.5 weeks, 5 weeks until training camp. And so we'll have a podcast each and every week up until Grand Park. And we still haven't got an official schedule yet on what training camp's going to look like at Grand Park. I know there was some talk of July 27th kind of being the day that veterans get back in the buildings with teams. I don't know if that is report day, if that's actual first practice day. I believe that's a Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll keep you posted on that front.
Kevin, happy belated Father's Day. I know we mentioned it last podcast, but
Thanks,
to all
man.
The fathers out there that are listening, happy Father's Day to you guys.
Yeah.
How was yours?
It was nice. Yeah, it was. It wasn't anything too out of the ordinary. I was able to play golf on Saturday, so I greatly appreciate having time out on the golf course. Rosie did take kind of a pseudo first step.
Nice.
Yesterday, or I should say Sunday. Don't know if she's really I don't think she has taken another step since, so maybe it was just kind of a false alarm, and I don't know if I like that, and I just rather crawl everywhere, and you turn the other way, and I'm 7 steps up. So, yeah, it was awesome, though. It was good Father's Day. And
I'm sure she's at the age where she's pulling herself up at any place she can be at.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't even know we had a drawer there. I didn't even know that you could, you can touch the burner now. Great. That's
all right.
Exactly what I want. So, no, it was a nice Father's Day. It was pretty good weather. We were up at my in-laws' lake house, and I know it was kind of dicey here in Indy, so it was nice to be up there, then stopped at my family's house on the way back. So
awesome.
Yeah, today's pod, we're going to get into what I liked and what I didn't like about the offseason. I feel like we are through the bulk of it, really probably 95% of it, to be honest with you. So kind of analyze what I think we look at as a pretty critical offseason for the Colts in 2021. And then, we got about 10 or 12 Twitter questions. Not a ton. We're kind of shortening up a little bit of the pod for you as we get into the quietest time of the offseason, but we'll continue to come at it once a week until training camp.
Yeah, let's start right there. You talk about let's start with what you did like with the offseason. And the first thing that you wanted to mention, and clearly Chris Ballard addressed it, the offensive line depth.
Yeah, again, this is a big priority for me entering the offseason. It was certainly a major mistake from last year's football team. I think something that we forget about the 2020 Colts is, yes, you had Costanzo get banged up late in the year. Braden Smith missed a game late in the season. Really, you had pretty good offensive line health. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm willing to bet if you look at the Colts O-line compared to the rest of the league, I would say the Colts had above average offensive line health. I cannot tell you, Chris, the last time the Colts had a starting offensive lineman miss 4 or 5 games in a row. Like something to that degree. I guess Costanzo to start the 2018 season when he had that hamstring. And again, you were scrambling your whole offensive line during that stretch. And then you eventually found that starting 5 that we see until today, until Costanzo decided to retire. But It's pretty wild to me that you've gone like nearly 3 seasons and you haven't had a guy, tear a meniscus and miss a month and a half. Something like that.
Right,
So I think it was important that you don't take that for granted and you still go out and you are able to add the offensive line depth that you have. I was working on a 53-man roster article yesterday morning that I'm going to post here right before training camp, just kind of a projected look at it. By the way, I don't know if our audience, I'm sure they've seen this, but just to remember, they're changing up roster cuts this year. I think I have this right, Chris, but basically the roster cut days are going to be on Tuesday during August.
Okay.
And you're going to start on, I think, August 17th, I believe, is the first cut down day. So that is after the first preseason game? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You cut from 90 to 85. So, whatever. You cut to 85 right now. 85 to 80 the following Tuesday. So that's after the second preseason game. Then after that third and final preseason game on Tuesday, August 31st. Typically it's been the Saturday of Labor Day.
Yeah.
Sounds like the NFL is saying, hey, college football, we can't compete with the first, which is shocking. The NFL is actually admitting that they can't compete with something. But they're right. The first Saturday of college football is heaven, and they have now pushed that up to Tuesday. So August 31st is the cut down day to 53. But basically what I'm getting at, Chris, is I started to cut down the offensive line, and boy, I mean, you're going to cut a guy that has a resume.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, we'll see how injuries play out and whatnot. But, yeah, I would say the thing I liked the most about this offseason was just really, really shoring up, at least on paper, that offensive line depth.
And you would imagine also, I mean, the locker room presence that those guys bring. I mean, they come to work every day with the hard hat,
Yeah.
If they've been in the league that long and they have a resume, they're coming to work.
Yeah, and I think obviously what you have now with Costanzo leaving is he was the epitome of maybe not the most vocal, but just carried himself with a work ethic that I know Quentin Nelson really respects, and I think a lot of guys up front. So a little bit of changing the guard there, just in pure leadership of that O-line room.
Mm-hmm.
But, Ryan Kelly's your NFLPA rep, and
Yep.
obviously Nelson carries himself with a work ethic and a presence that's second to none. So I'm not worried about that there at all.
Yeah. Second thing you wanted to talk about was taking a chance at quarterback. I know it was a kind of a head scratcher for some people, but the way we've talked about it in previous podcasts, if people want to go back and listen, Sam Ehlinger, bring someone else in.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm looking here more at Carson Wentz. Like, to me, that is taking a chance at QB that still offers a relatively high ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I kind of look at it as, you could go a little bit more stopgap, but I was team draft, as you guys have heard on this podcast, but the closest thing to team draft that offers, again, a ceiling that's relatively high is a move that you made with Carson Wentz. Some might argue Sam Darnold, whatever, he's younger, similar top 3 pick, whatnot, still on the rookie deal, things like that. Sure, but obviously the relationship with, Frank Reich is huge. I was at Anthony Calhoun's golf outing yesterday and I was talking to Marlon Jackson about this. It's that coach-player relationship at that position that is just so rare. You really don't see that happen many times in the NFL. It is a not-for-long league with players and coaches. It's one of those things where I also saw Chuck Pagano yesterday. I'm thinking to myself, I know Chuck retired. I don't know if Chuck ever would have got another chance to be a head coach. And you look at the pure win-loss resume of Chuck Pagano, and it's worthy of interviews. It's worthy of taking another chance. But that's just how this league operates about coaches, players, much more so than coaches. So that's where I think that there's questions about this working out. But if it does work out, this is a decade-long possibility, and that's very difficult to find at that position at a decently affordable price package, whatever you want to call it. Now, again, we'll have to see how it all plays out and everything, but I appreciate taking a chance at quarterback for the long term. There's just not many times where you enter an offseason and be like, that That is the golden opportunity right there at quarterback without mortgaging, a serious amount of the future there. So,
well, I mean, your point 1 and 2 go hand in hand. I mean, if you're Carson Wentz coming into a new city,
right,
obviously you're coming back to Frank Reich, but you know how many times you've been hit, how many times you've been sacked, quarterback pressures, and you're seeing the offensive line that you're coming into, and you're also seeing the depth that Chris Ballard's adding to that offensive line. You have to feel pretty confident.
This is exactly what Carson Wentz would want in a second opportunity.
Yeah.
Back to the point of it's not many times where you can get paired up with a coach that you liked and a player that you liked, and those two both being on the same page. It's also where this opportunity is pretty enticing. Like you said, from the offensive line standpoint, obviously Jonathan Taylor in that running back room, ranks right up there with anybody else in the league. Frank Reich is a play caller, those sorts of things. So, yeah, taking a swing at QB, I'm good with it. The stopgap, the Daltons, the Nick Foles, whatever else was thrown out there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Didn't like it.
No more revolving door, hopefully, at quarterback. Let's talk about the future at the defensive end spot.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of taking a swing there. I would have liked to have seen more in free agency at D-end, but at the same time, I can acknowledge that the future at D-end is very enticing, very, very intriguing. And we've made the baseball analogy around the draft of just because you've missed, you keep on swinging. That position means way too much in sports that you, especially with your defensive structure, you have to. And in Kwity Paye and Dayo Adengbo, you have two very different body types.
Yep.
I think you've got some versatility. And we've stressed on this podcast that with this defensive system, to disrupt timing, you've got to do it at the line of scrimmage. It's very difficult for this team, just philosophically, with how they do things in the back end, to disrupt a lot of timing there in coverage. And twofold, it's difficult for corners to do that without getting a bunch of flags. That's just how today's NFL is refereed. So as much as back-to-back defensive ends might make some people a little bit maddening, like from draft philosophy standpoint, and I can hear you out, especially when, you don't have another pick till round 4, you did address defensive end very seriously. So you have to acknowledge that as well. So when you enter contract years for Tyquan Lewis and Kamoko Toure, Ben Banagou's reaching the back half of his rookie contract, and none of them do you sit here and say, we're debating extensions. I wrote it last week on the website. Braden Smith and Darius Leonard, no brainers. Nyheim Hines, that's being debated. It's not Tyquan Lewis and Kamoko Toure, two second-round picks, in that same draft class. So that is something that I like. I feel like when you talk about the future at D tackle, you talk about the future at linebacker, you talk about the future at safety, you sleep pretty well at night with all those spots. Future at corner, maybe not as much. Future at D-end, super up in the air.
Yeah.
And you certainly addressed it with some key resources. So I would say that's kind of the third and final thing that I really liked if we boil it down to just 3.
All right. Let's jump to what you didn't like this offseason. It's offseason. We're going to stay there with the defensive end and letting Danico Autry walk.
Yeah, this kind of gets back to the present at defensive end, Chris. I think back to a podcast and an article I did back in February. We did the green, yellow, red, ranking the free agents for the Colts. Green, obviously, want to keep, should keep, those things. Yellow, a little bit more on the fence. Our greens were Xavier Rhodes, Al-Qadim Muhammad, and Danico Autry. Is Autry exactly what you want? You're nitpicking a little bit, but is that dude tough as a you know what? And does he give you run down and pass down? Does he give you some versatility? I mean, that dude is he's a different breed. And I think in Tennessee, Mike Vrabel's going to appreciate that on their defensive line. And that's a guy that I think you're going to miss from those sorts of versatility, the toughness factor, and just the production. Again, he produced. Now, it's one of those things where I think Tyquan Lewis can make a jump and fill a lot of that production. Now, Tyquan Lewis has been banged up. We have to acknowledge his first 2 seasons, was healthy last year, but it's just a trickle-down effect. If Lewis is now Autry, who's your new Lewis?
Right.
do you have enough of defensive end? What if you need Autry to, or what if you need Lewis to slide inside and play a little bit there as well? So I think letting Danico Autry walk, and by all accounts, it was very close, and the Colts just said no. And Danico Autry at the age of 30 or 31, yeah, I mean, he's certainly going to go take that money as I think he's a 7th-round draft pick or something like that. So don't fault him at all for that. And that was one thing that I thought to myself, present-wise, you're going to miss him.
It's funny, too, looking at, social media is such a big influencer right now with what everyone sees when he was just doing some drop-back stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's like it's one drill at practice.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's not dropping back a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we're going to see Danico Autry guarding Nyheim Hines out of the backfield in those two meetings. Great for the Colts if that happens, but I don't think Mike Vrabel is that stupid.
No, I don't either. All right, let's talk about your second point here of things you didn't like. The future at left tackle.
Yeah, so obviously we had future at DN that you like, future at left tackle, very much up in the air. Now, in a 3 to 5 year period, this could be solved with Eric Fisher and that signing. It's still a concern to me, Chris, just a little bit more from a depth standpoint. Yes, you have a Sam Tevy, you have a Julian Davenport, you have a Will Holden. Like, we can debate how good those guys are. But, just that 5th-round pick. Just get that coaching staff somebody to mold. You find those. And the Colts had guys on their board, I keep on coming back to. I think Tommy Doyle's a guy from Buffalo, or I think it was drafted by Buffalo, that I thought the Colts had interest in. The kid out of Northern Iowa as well, Spencer Brown. Those are some big-time athletes at that spot that come from different levels, a little bit raw. So I just felt like giving this coaching staff something to work with would be smart. And that is me saying that even with assuming Eric Fisher's going to be healthy. Now, if Eric Fisher's not healthy, now you're back in full-time scramble mode for not only the future, but also the present at that position. So, when we talked about the 5 big positions entering this offseason, Chris, of quarterback, wideout, left tackle, corner, D-end, QB, yeah, you feel like, you hope that the future's there. Defensive end, we talked about it. The future is there. Wideout, you didn't do anything, really, but internally it could be there if Pittman and Campbell take their respective jumps, which are in 2 different areas. Corner, again, a little bit up in the air, and left tackle very much up in the air as well. So, yeah, future at left tackle, definitely a thing that I did not like.
Well, you just mentioned it right there. Let's jump to your last point. No outside wide receiver or tight end.
Yeah, this gets back to let me jot down a quick note here if you don't mind.
No, you're all good.
This gets back to something of when we kind of made our offseason blueprint, Chris, about what do you want to, who do you want to see bring back, who do you want to see added, and I felt like these 2 positions, again, we just laid out those 5. They could have used another body along with the re-sign of Hilton and Rhodes, which we ended up seeing. It's interesting to me how, Hilton, Chris Ballard felt like at one time it was a true coin flip, whether he's going to be back or not. And at that point, you were, a week into free agency, I want to say, when Hilton came back, something like that. Shit. Who are you going out and getting at that point, wideout-wise? I think that would have been super interesting to see that play out. So I think we both can – I think I can sit here and say this. Both of those positions underperformed last year. And you didn't make any outside additions. Now, I guess Marvell Tell would count as one, but it's banking on a Tell, it's banking on a Yassine, Isaiah Rodgers. Wideout-wise, it's banking on the health of Paris Campbell. And I know you drafted Mike Straw in the 7th round, but he's still a Division II guy that inevitably is going to have some sort of growth. So that would be something that I didn't like, mostly in free agency. With that. But I felt like both those positions, considering I felt like they were costly. There were some decent moments at the top of those position groups, probably corner more so than wideout last year. But in this league, in those positions, you rely on 4 or 5 wideouts over a season. You rely on 4 or 5 corners. And I just felt like an outside addition should have been made at one or both of those spots.
If T.Y. Hilton doesn't re-sign with the Colts, do you go with Julio?
Oh boy, that's interesting.
You're gonna need another wideout.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like you had to do something earlier. Maybe in March, April, teams knew that Julio was certainly on the block. It seems like Atlanta was still kind of sifting through the quarterback Kyle Pitts debate there early in the draft, but yeah, I probably would have looked long and hard at it. Now, it is different skill sets at wideout.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you were a week into free agency, Chris, and by that point, most of those wideouts, it was a deeper class. They were gone. Now, does that change what you did in the draft? I don't know who was available. Second round wideout, Dio Dengbo again is, boy, Chris Ballard would love to have him as a son, I feel like, with how much he loves that guy. But that could have been in a position maybe you explore of instead of going the 2 DN route that you did.
Have you seen some of the Golden Tate talk, or do you think the Colts are going to sign anyone else before?
I don't. I really don't. I know I've seen Tate's name, and I love Tate. I mean, I've always loved Golden Tate, dating back to his early days at Notre Dame, but I just don't see them signing another marquee veteran until camp starts. I think they're going to let it roll, and then, even some of these veterans, and I think you were texting me last week about Justin Houston, or maybe it was Malik Hooker.
Hooker, yeah.
Hooker, you were texting me about. Right now, you just don't see many guys get signed. Julio was different. But, if you're a vet, shit, I'm good. Like, why do I need to be – let's wait a week or two into the preseason or training camp. Like, I'll train my ass off on my own, and then all of a sudden you have a big injury in week 2 of training camp or the first preseason game, and now you need me, so now my leverage is higher. And as long as you are confident, and this is where veterans just got to look in the mirror, you've got to make sure that you're in shape. And obviously it's different, you on your own versus in a camp, but that's probably how I would approach things. Now, Hooker, a little bit different, but a guy like Houston or, Tate or somebody like that, I'd probably wait a little.
Okay. All right, those were things that you like, things that you didn't like. Now let's jump to Twitter questions. Like you said, not too many right now, but we are sifting through them, and we'll make sure.
Keep on sending. I know, Chris, you get some, I get some. If you guys have questions, again, I still have a list that we're just dumping into the pod each week, and I don't know, we probably have 20, 25 questions still on that list, but we'll always take them in the DMs for Chris or I.
All right, let's start with Sam. He said, I'd like to hear your thoughts on how the Colts will do the reps in the preseason, how long the starters, the backup, and the fringe roster guys play. I think it would be interesting to see how teams navigate that with only 3 games now.
Sam, I think it's going to be extremely interesting how teams handle the preseason this year. I think back to Frank Reich on the job for, I don't know, maybe a week or two, and they go over and they have a town hall at Scottish Rite downtown, which that's actually where we had our wedding reception. Beautiful venue.
It's a great venue.
So they got a town hall. It's all these Colts season ticket holders, whatnot, and somehow they get asked about the preseason. Frank does, and handling starters, and he's pretty much just like, oh, I'm not playing my starters in the preseason. And I'm thinking to myself, Frank, these are season ticket members. They pay a lot of money for preseason tickets. You might want to fib a little bit there, but that's just Frank. He's just pretty candid and honest with it. So I don't think Frank Reich's a big believer in it. Having said that, the pandemic wasn't around back then, and limited off seasons weren't really around back then. A lot of stuff's changed in the NFL since 2018 when Frank Reich took the job. So, the Colts are playing, and let me pull up their schedule. It's, every 6? Yeah. So August 15th, that's a Sunday. Then August 21st, that's Saturday night at the Vikings. And then August 27th, that is a Friday at Detroit at 7 o'clock. So that's every 6 days you're playing. I mean, Chris, I think your starters can go a quarter in the opener, 2 quarters in the second game, and 2.5 to 3 quarters in the third game. That's how I would handle it. I'm not necessarily saying that's how the Colts will handle it. We'll see, but, man, I mean, new quarterback, Sam Tevye at left tackle. I mean, there are some big-time meshing of,
right.
Yes, you bring back 19 starter or something like that, but at some key spots, Kwity Paye, I would like to see some guys out there. And then I just don't know how you ignore this. It's kind of, and I'm filling in for Dan Dockich today and Thursday, Friday. I'm filling in on the morning show all next week. So, I've kind of thinking about Pacer stuff, Colts stuff. Like, if you're the Pacers right now, like, you think and you have these big meetings and you get all these big decision makers in a room and you're like, all right, state of the franchise, where are we at? Oh, we haven't won a playoff series in 7 years. Haven't won a playoff game in 3 years. Like, that's just reality.
Yeah.
If I'm Frank Reich and Chris Ballard and I'm sitting in those rooms, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do we get our guys ready for the start of the season? All right, what's the schedule look like start of the year? Oh, it looks like that?
Right out of the gate. Yep.
Yeah, we haven't won an opener in how long? Pete Ward chimes in because he's the one that's been there, longer than anybody. Like, that stuff would keep me up at night. So when I hear that, and I know it's a fine balance of, do you go super hard and risk injury, or do you, rest guys and, save them for the season? I would play my guys. That's what I would do. Because I look at it, Chris, too, as that final preseason game. I think we talked about this a little bit last week.
The amount of time between the last preseason game and the first game.
Right.
Yeah.
So Friday, August 27th, that is a full 16 days until the Seahawks come to town. So,
and again, outside of the Vikings, which made a push late in last season, you have a pretty reasonable. I mean, the Panthers and the Lions, like, just give your guys reps.
Yeah, and I'm not. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not too worried about who you're playing necessarily in the preseason. Like, but I just look at it 16 days, and I'm like, that's a lot of time. So, Sam, I would play him a good amount. Obviously, it's something we'll get Frank's insight on here once training camp unfolds, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, Kevin, you just mentioned the Pacers a little bit there, and Michael loves your opinions on the Pacers and loves the Pacers podcast that you put out. He's not going to trade Darius Leonard. He feels like his intangibles and the ball hawk, he would be too tough to replace, and that goes back to a question last week where someone asked if we would trade Darius Leonard for the same type of package that the Bears got for Mac.
Yeah, and I know we had a couple of comments, I think, in the YouTube, people pretty like, what the hell did you say about Darius Leonard trading him? So let me just kind of double back on that a little bit, Chris. Very fair, what Michael says on Darius Leonard right here. I totally get that he is unique. I mean, he is a very, very rare linebacker. I guess I kind of look at it like this, Chris. And I'll put my teacher hat on as the son of Colleen and Bruce Bowen. If Leonard is an A, like grading scale at linebacker, because remember, we said last week, Chris, that you would get 2 first-round picks for trading Darius Leonard. So let's say Leonard's an A. Would you sacrifice getting a B-minus linebacker in the draft while also saving some stuff financially? Yep. So you're going from the A to the B-minus, and you're potentially getting a left tackle or cornerback of the future. I think that's what you're looking at there of, like, I'm trying to think of, like, decent linebackers that have been drafted recently. I know linebackers in general just haven't been drafted super high, but, I mean, honestly, let's say you get another Bobby Okereke. So you got 2 of them.
Okay.
And now you're giving Chris Ballard a first-round pick at left tackle or corner. That's pretty enticing to me. Now, I get it. Leonard finds the ball a whole lot, and you're going to see a drop. And he does more than just find the ball. I should acknowledge. I mean, we talk about leadership and all that, and what he brings, and he's got to be more vocal with Anthony Walker. Maybe that plays into it. Anthony Walker's gone. Like, need a bit more vocal leader. So I'm listening to people on the other side of the argument, and if we were at a bar, we'd probably go one more round just to really sift through this debate. But I think it's a really good debate.
It is.
So, yeah, I don't know. I forget who sent that in last week, but that is what June and July is all about, debating some of this stuff. But we know Darius Leonard is going nowhere.
Yep, and hopefully, again, like we said, Beers with Bowen.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll be out, and we can have these debates
August
with another round.
Late August, early September. Kind of what we're shooting for. We're gonna finalize that in July and keep you guys posted on that. But I would say very good chance we are out and about for that one.
Love it. This one comes from Matt. I know Carson Wentz was sacked 50 times in 12 games, but how many sacks were actually in pocket tackles? Carson can scramble and run to extend plays, so I'm thinking maybe some of the sacks were actually him running out of bounds to avoid taking big hits and things of that nature. Shy of the line of scrimmage, which technically is a sack, so maybe he's not as damaged as some people are saying.
Yeah, this has been kind of a popular, I think, topic lately. I've gone back and watched the sacks, and let me say that Philadelphia O-line was not good. I mean, we can totally acknowledge that. So I do feel like that is something that you have to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there are times where you hear the phrase often with quarterbacks, take the profit. That was not as there for Carson Wentz. Throwing with anticipation, taking the profit. It might not be the super chunk play, but it's a chunk to a degree. So when you go back and watch some of those sacks as well, again, there were several where it's just like, wow, that O-line is – they want Carson Wentz to get hurt. It's Friday Night, or it's whatever. It's Remember the Titans when the dude lets the guy in and sacks Sunshine maybe? Or somebody.
Sunshine flips him over.
Yeah. For as high a football IQ as Carson Wentz has, or I guess IQ in general, do you feel like he has? There are some head scratchers with him in his decision-making last year. So is that like, I know my talent and I know I can extend plays and I want to cash and cash big? Maybe. And if you look at when they got the ball out quick, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I remember back when we did the playing style debate between him and Rivers, I want to say Wentz was like 35th in the NFL in getting the ball out quick last year, and I think Rivers was like 5th or 6th. And again, that's timing, 2.5 versus 2.9. And 4/10 might not seem like a lot. It's a whole lot when it's only, 3 seconds max. So that will be very interesting to watch because I went back and looked at Carson's, how quickly he got it out his first 2 years in the league with Frank. Not like absurdly quicker, I believe. But again, Frank wasn't even the play caller then, so it's not fully into that. But I think we can say this, Matt. The Philly offensive line was bad, and Carson Wentz had some poor decision-making. So how much do you correct that? Can you say – because I felt like that's what Andrew did the best in 2018 when he came back. Lived with Nyheim Hines, got the ball out quicker, had a career high in completion percentage. I think had a career high, if I'm not mistaken, in efficiency in general. Like, he understood then, I do need to get the ball out quicker. Now, certainly, there's times where you extend plays, and there's times where you want to dial up a bigger chunk. I'm all for that, and that would be foolish to ignore those strengths of Carson Wentz, because we know Rivers' strengths. Rivers' strengths is accuracy in the short areas, certainly IQ, chess match stuff, all those things. But you got to, I think, kind of mix that to really make sure that not only Carson Wentz isn't getting sacked a whole lot, because 50 times in 12 games is an absurd number.
Yeah.
But, he has battled some injuries in his career as well. So yeah.
Okay, we're going to jump to a question from Trenton. Do you agree that Sam Ehlinger is the most undervalued draft pick? He adds the high character and it value that a guy from a similar and is a guy from a similar upraising and culture as Carson Wentz to the quarterback room. And also, let's talk about his bonus in terms of scouting. He adds a scouting quarterback like Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray at practice. And for a 6-rounder, Trenton would rather have someone like that than a special team piece that's just going to play only on special teams.
Yeah, undervalued. That's an interesting word. I guess let me start here. Upraising culture as Wentz. Do I feel like they're both good humans that you'd like your daughter to marry? Yes. I don't think we can act like Texas and North Dakota are the same. I think Texas high school football and being the quarterback at, where was he, Westlake or Carroll or wherever the hell he went.
Just down there, like you're a superstar in high school to start, and then you go to Texas.
First period, it's 3 girls. Second period, it's 4 girls who want to talk. I mean, it's Carson, I don't know if you felt the same. Who knows? Maybe in North Dakota you got nothing else to do besides go to high school football. So, Trenton, I think where Sam Ehlinger helps this team is a kick in the butt to Jacob Eason. It's like the high school basketball coach that keeps that 10th or 11th guy that probably is more like the 16th talented kid at tryouts, but he works.
Yeah.
And in practice, he's going to piss people off, and you want the competitive spirit in your other guys to come out because that dude is just working. And I think Ellinger will do that a little bit with Eason. As far as the entire locker room, nothing against Sam Ellinger. Who the hell is listening to a third-string quarterback?
Right.
Like I'm sorry. I just think that's. I know it sounds harsh, but I think that's where you're at. Now to Trenton's second point about scout team stuff. Yeah, I think it's good. I guess we're kind of debating here. Would you rather have Sam Ellinger or Isaiah Rodgers? Would you rather have Sam Ellinger or Jordan Glasgow? When Jordan Glasgow or Isaiah Rodgers down a couple punts inside the 5, or Rodgers takes it to the house like we saw. I mean,
Yep.
that's when you're like, wait, what? Now, obviously, Ellinger's stuff is a little bit more behind the scenes. Having said that, I think he's fairly valued, but if he starts doing the short yardage stuff or the whatever Taysom Hill stuff, that changes things.
Right.
But if he's not doing that stuff, I don't think it's this massive change. But the Eason quarterback room, I think, is pretty good.
Stoking that fire.
Yeah.
All right, well, you just mentioned Isaiah Rodgers. John has a question about the Colts cornerback rotation. Do you think the Colts will go with a matchup rotation for their third cornerback spot? For example, if you're playing a team with multiple fast receivers, you have Isaiah Rodgers in. And then when you're playing teams with big body receivers, Marvell Tell is your starting third corner.
Just noticed my fly was unzipped. I'm sorry if you saw that.
I did not notice. No.
I guess I was sitting down when you walked in the room, so I apologize to anyone here on the 5th floor if there was some exposure there. Please don't go to HR. Okay, I was thrown off. Give it to me again.
So if you're playing fast receivers, would you play Isaiah Rodgers, and then big receivers Marvell Tell? Would you do kind of a rotational cornerback shift this year?
Got it. Well, I mean, I don't see Rocky Scene's name mentioned, so John might be throwing old Rock out there. It sounds like a good idea. Yeah, I think something we have to remember is third corner is your second outside corner for the Colts. That's what that means.
Right.
Kenny Moore's in the slot. I hear John out, but I also just think teams move wide receivers around so much. It's really hard to kind of match from a corner standpoint.
Yeah.
We didn't see a lot of shadowing from Xavier Rhodes last season, and he played an exceptional level. So I guess if you're a receiver core in general, if whatever, you're playing, hell, I'm trying to think of I don't know, I feel like Kansas City's wideouts are all pretty fast, maybe not as big. Is that something where you play Rodgers a little bit more against them? Whereas if you're facing a bigger wideout group, that's where you would.
So when you got like the Bucks or.
Yeah. I think that's a good team to pull out there. But I think for the most part, it is chess match, and teams just move their wideouts that much or that often around. So I don't necessarily know if that would work.
Kevin, John would love to know what Carson Wentz's accuracy has been when throwing to each position group.
Yeah, John, I don't. That's a lot for me to find. I don't really know, to be honest with you. I know he struggled with the high percentage throws last year to running backs, even a little bit of tight ends. Now, there were a good amount of throwaways for him last year, and I think that, that's twofold. One, it's pressure that got to him, and I mean, pass pressure, nothing against him, the pressure of playing in Philly. And then also, it's separation. Are your pass catchers creating enough separation there as well? So I think it's both of those things. But, yeah, he struggled a bit with some of the higher percentage stuff, and that goes back to what we said earlier about taking those profits and being dialed in.
All right, we're going to jump to an interesting one from Z-Palm. Lot to navigate here, so just stick with me. Hey, Chris and KB, I feel like Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the red string everywhere chanting Pepe Silvia. But hear me out. Phillip Rivers was elite between the 20s, but crumbled inside the red zone. The 2020 Colts posted 56% touchdown percentage in the red zone, which was 21st overall and worst by any team in the playoffs. No wonder why Hot Rod broke records. All of his kicks were chip shots, and he had an endless opportunity to score points, i.e. we didn't score any touchdowns. This is where Carson Wentz comes in and makes an impact. In 2019, with Jacoby, the Colts' red zone percentage was 64%, In 2018, with luck, it was 67%. Eagles' numbers in 17 was 65%, and 18 was 58%, 19 67%, and in 20 61%. I don't have the figures, but I'm willing to bet a good chunk of our red zone touchdowns were rushing too. Less of a question and more of a talking point.
Okay, there's a lot of good stuff in there, and I know that there's a lot of stuff in there. I think red zone is about getting into the right play, and then you just have a lot of off-script stuff. It's quick, it's short areas of the field, it's condensed. I think what will help, two things are really going to help. Well, I guess one thing's really going to help out Carson Wentz this year. That's the run game inside the 20.
Yep.
And then one thing that's really going to help the Colts inside the 20 is Wentz's ability with his legs. Wentz I think he ran like 4.8, something like that at the combine. I mean, I don't think he's a luck athlete, but I think he's much more closer to luck than he is to Rivers. So just that threat is going to be so important to this team. And I really think the RPO element, I was playing in front of Marcus Brady yesterday. I wanted to just be like, they're going to run so many RPOs. You guys are going to run so many RPOs. Like, I can just feel it this season. So I think those are the things when we talk specifically red zone. And I think we mentioned it. I'm not sure if Z-Paul mentioned it here, but when we had Frank Reich on the pod a few weeks ago, I asked him that question about red zone, and he brought up Carson in 2017 when he was the best red zone QB, and they kind of struggled in those first few games when Nick Foles got in the lineup in the red zone right after that. They were able to get it corrected for the playoffs, but they kind of struggled there. That's very real for me, or really resonates to me of like, yeah, Carson is going to help in that area. And obviously it was an area where you struggled last year. So I really just think this team running it well inside the 20 is going to be big. And I know there's some short yardage plays last year. Obviously we think back to week 1 and the 4th and 1 stuff when you had Hines in there, and I think you were pulling. I do think this team, if they can run it well inside the 20 and then have Carson's legs, it needs to and will be a better red zone team.
All right, we have 4 more. This one from Wake Spike. Has Frank Reich hired a clock manager for the coming season? After the playoff game, this seems like it was a need that could easily be fixed.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's been hired officially on that staff. God, it was painful to watch that final drive against Buffalo.
I know it.
The Colts were really not in a lot of those situations last season. Chris, late game, here's a ball, got to go down and score. Is this a flaw that was masked? Like, that's a question that I have of like, obviously you got a totally different quarterback in here. Is that good or is that bad? I would think good. You can get a little bit more vertical. I don't know, but again, from a mastering of the offense sense, you're maybe taking a slight step back in that area. So this is always an area that I watch, and frankly, I watch this for every team around the league. Like when I watch other games, obviously we love late game drama, and I'm very fixed on like, when do you take timeouts? How do you utilize the sideline? When do you spike the ball? That stuff is super interesting to me. I also enjoy does the quarterback dictate all that? Do you trust the quarterback to handle all that? Do you have a coach on the sideline that does that? Is it purely the head coach? Is there someone in the booth that's yelling down and saying, timeout, spike, those sorts of things. So
the chess match element of it.
Right. Just because it is a league that's so close. So I don't think there's been anything official. Certainly nothing. They haven't made a higher public, but I might ask Frank that sometime in training camp.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Seattle, that's what Russell Wilson was upset about.
Right.
I mean, he felt like he wasn't able to actually truly lead on the field because Pete Carroll was taking over that.
And obviously, Aaron Rodgers, to a degree, would echo those same sentiments. So, we watched Peyton have a mastery of it when he was here for so long, and you sneak points at the end of the half. You sneak points, at the end of games, obviously, but certainly at the end of half, just makes a world of difference.
Mm-hmm. All right, question from Rod. Do you think the loss of 2 veterans in the locker room, such as Justin Houston and Phillip Rivers, will be too detrimental to that locker room?
I don't think so. I mean, I know Houston broke down the huddle before games. Does that become Leonard's job? Does it become DeForest Buckner's job? We've talked about Darius being, a little bit more of I got to get on some guys this year. Carson, certainly has got to take on some vocal leadership, but I don't think an overwhelming, loss. Obviously, Rivers, he didn't do a whole lot off the field last year, so how much of his presence was
Right.
really felt. Certainly in huddles and in a big offensive meeting, but I don't think as much as you would normally have in a year. You do watch Rivers. I feel like I've seen some like NC State video of him talking to present day NC State teams, and boy, he can give it, and I do think people enjoy playing with him, certainly. But I'm not too worried about that, Rod. And I think you're expecting guys to rise up in that area of like, hey, let's get the public accountability that needs to be here inside that locker room. And Kenny Moore, thrown into that mix, Nelson thrown into that mix, Ryan Kelly as well, those guys.
Yeah, and that's where you're happy with how Chris Ballard drafts.
Yeah,
You're drafting guys that
the whole character
can be a locker room presence for sure. Well, let's stick there with Chris Ballard. This one comes from Fowler. How would you rate Chris Ballard as he reportedly prepares to sign an extension? He has a home run hit in Quentin Nelson, Darius Leonard, and DeForest Buckner. Probably Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. as well. But, man, if you redo some of those second-rounders and this team is another step up, for instance, Taekwon Lewis, Ben Banigou, and Kamoko Toure.
Yeah, Fowler. Obviously, you just have draft moves in here. I think draft-wise, I'm giving it a high B. Borderline A. Where I don't go A is just the true marquee positions we haven't seen enough. You think about corner and wideout, couple question marks there, drafting-wise. Obviously, you haven't really done a whole lot tackle-wise. QB, of course, as well. And the defensive end, it's been, all misses draft-wise. So, overall great. I'd probably push it back to, more of a B. When Chris took over, and part of this is coming from, I think, we heard Ryan Grigson on our airwaves last week, and I'll give some thoughts on that when I fill in for Dan later today. But it was an 8-8 football team, record-wise, with minimal, and I stress minimal, foundational pieces. And then obviously Chris felt like he got to overhaul that entire defense. But I just do think team success has to matter. Like, it has to matter. And the fact that it has been no division titles in just one playoff game, I've got to take a full letter grade off. Just because at the end of the day, frankly, that's what matters. Like, if you draft well, let's say you double the Chris Ballard resume for the next 5 years, or this is year 5, I think, so 4 years. 2 playoff wins, and let's say you throw in a division title. Like, that resume 8 years in of 2 playoff wins and 1 division title, that's not getting you into the Hall. That's not getting you anywhere. So that's where I'll go with kind of B right now. I know some people will probably have a little bit higher than that just because they are so focused on the draft. And, there's been some brilliant drafts. But, yeah, in this scenario here, Fowler, B-plus draft, B-ish overall.
Okay, that's fair. Last question for the podcast comes from Dalton. He's holding no punches here.
Oh, gosh.
Was there ever a time when you worked for the Colts that you wanted to go on radio and shit all over Ryan Grigson or Chuck Pagano?
Oh, man, Dalton, what a question. Boy, nothing screams June 22nd question
Right.
like this, Chris. Boy, the old fake punt, that was certainly tough to just tiptoe. Yeah, there were certainly times where I disagreed with those decisions by those two and what the Colts let me write or say, and that's obviously the pros and cons of working for a team. They are great pros. You get to see some awesome things and hang out with whatever cool people and go to incredible venues, but from a journalistic standpoint, it's not real journalism. You have to have a PR spin to it. I'll never forget Grigson cussing me out the day of the 2015 draft. I think I was just eating lunch. I didn't even know that he knew where my office was, and then he selects Philip Dorsett 7 hours later, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, if that's not bad karma.
Oh,
usually I'm not a believer in jinxes, but boy, that's not great karma there. So I saw he was making the rounds, and Ryan and I have talked since then, and he has eventually apologized for that. Took him a few years, but he eventually did. So he's making the rounds with Dan last week, trying to save a little face once that GM job. And me personally, I probably don't think, I mean, he's young, but I don't think he'll get another opportunity. But, I mean, who knows? If the Browns go on some crazy run and he gets promoted and whatnot, you never know. And working under Andrew Berry, I think is great. And I think Ryan has admitted this before. Like, he never should have been hired as a GM. Like, he was in over his head.
Yeah.
I think he would be the first. I think he said that, honestly, with Dan a little bit last week. And him and I have had that conversation about it. And, that's on Jim, I think, for making that hire there. And we talk about it often. You typically go polar opposite in your hires.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how Nate Bjorkgren and the next hire there. But Jim Caldwell to Chuck Pagano is very different. And Chuck Pagano to Josh McDaniels is different. Josh McDaniels to Frank Reich is different. That's just how the people in those positions. So, yeah, Dalton, you're going to need a lot more, I think, liquor in me than some water at 9:54 in the morning to get those stories out. But, yeah, I will share just a little bit of tidbit to our diehards that have made it 50-some minutes into this edition of the corner.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear your breakdown later today. Like you said, you're filling in with Dan Dockich. For our local listeners, what days are you in studio this week?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Noon to 3 in studio on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for Dan this week. I'm hoping to have Dane Brugler on, the draft guy from The Athletic, later in the week. I know he's been a great guest. And just kind of want to get his thoughts on the guys the Colts drafted, and then a look ahead. As always, it's never too early to look ahead to next year's draft. So if we get Dane on, we might throw this into the pod. But yeah, I'm doing that this week, and the next week, Jeff Rickard and myself, 7 to 10 a.m. every morning, Monday through Friday. So
and for our national and international fans, always look in the subscription or look in the description below. We will have the Kevin's Corner articles up. Anything special you're writing on this week?
Yeah, so I just posted something on did Kamoko Ture yesterday, kind of the what if. I think he's the greatest what if on this team. And then today, a little bit of T.Y. Hilton and just how different the presence of Carson Wentz could make him this year. So I think that I've got something Ballard related that I want to get to later in the week as well. So make sure to check that out. But as we've mentioned, we will continue to post daily content, and we'll get into the scout stories, looking back on some of the draft picks. Do that kind of over July 4th week as well. So that's 1075thefan.com for all that. And as Chris said, he's been putting those links in the YouTube description, so I appreciate you for doing that. Anything else, man?
No, a quick shout out. My buddy Evan Denary got engaged this weekend to his beautiful now fiance Meredith.
I know Evan Denary,
son of Chris Denary, the Pacers. I guess Bally Sports now broadcaster. Yeah. So congratulations to those guys.
I grew up playing basketball and baseball with Evan back in the day. Chris Denary was our basketball coach over at the IBA, and just a terrific human. Talked to Chris in turn 4 before the race started a few weeks back, and he wasn't there yesterday. I was talking to Jeremiah Johnson. I'm like, where's CD? He always makes it out here, and he's like, he's down in Myrtle Beach. Evan proposed, and he was hanging down there for a few extra days. So shout out to the Denary crew. A lot of boys in that family.
Oh, yeah.
And a great group there. So, all right, man. Well, I think that's it on my side. Like I said, we'll be back probably next Tuesday with another edition of Kevin's Corner. And he's Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week on the pod. This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.